I'll flip over to the result.
I totally agree.
Right.
Yes.
So the reason that some seeds go into the major.
He's got.
Morning, everyone, and welcome. Good day, everyone. Welcome committee members and members of the public. We don't have any today, but we may have some online, and of course, our staff. Please ensure that your devices are either off or switched to silent whilst the meeting is in progress. And as always, if a cell phone rings, we will pause the meeting so that the meeting is not interrupted. This meeting is being held in the supper room of the Waikinga Centre, Martinborough Town Hall, and it is being live streamed and will be available to view on Council's YouTube channel. We don't have any public in attendance today, but a reminder that our emergency exits are behind me and the door that you may have come in, and that we will gather at the playground in the event of an emergency. Just to the karakia, have we got any volunteers for the karakia this morning? No, I will do the karakia this morning. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa whanamo te moana, hei huri hua rahi matatu, ai te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tatu, ia tatu katoa.
Yeah, taiki.
Taiki. Yeah.
Do we have any apologies? We look like we're in a nice full room this morning, so
No, some.
do we need to move and send it to move at the end? No, it's good. Any conflicts of interest this morning, please? No conflicts of interest here. Are there any acknowledgements and tributes this morning, please? Any urgent business? Yeah, on a roll this morning. Brings us to our decision reports and from the Chief Executive and Council officers, and the only one on the agenda this morning is the Representation Review Deliberations report. Now, welcome Nikki and Rob's table to take us through the report and highlight any key points, bearing in mind that
Can I just ask a question to perhaps forestall wasting our officers' time? Does anyone around the table see that 129 submissions out of 9,000 ratepayers gives us any mandate to change anything?
Unfortunately, this is the process that we have to.
Absolutely, yeah, we've got the report, but I don't want to waste everybody's time here if we don't have a mandate to change. And that's the question we have to answer.
Yeah, the decision makers.
So sorry, can you answer that?
So through you, Chair, today as the deliberations process, I am, after some discussion around the submissions received, I'm very keen to just acknowledge that we have received those submissions, and some of the free text, I think, as well, around what people have suggested, what their thoughts are, would be good to debate. Following this, we are looking for recommendations for the final proposal, and as part of that, you will need to give council officers clear direction on what that final proposal may be, which could very well be the initial proposal is put through as the final proposal, but some understanding of why that is important today as well.
Thank you. Any further points that you'd like to make to the paper, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So firstly, my apologies, there was error in some data reporting related to question 1. I have given you a printed copy with those updated figures. My apologies for that. Also, just some interesting comparisons in regards to those submission numbers. So as Councillor Plummer raised, there were 129 submissions for the representation review. Last time the representation review was undertaken, we received 8 submissions. And just put in comparison, we had 131 submissions for the annual plan. The free text that has been pulled through into the deliberations report is my interpretation of that free text. And I just wanted to acknowledge that you may have different views on what some of that text may imply or the meaning behind it. And also the author may have some additional thoughts around that have not been captured in the report. The free text there was a lot of it, and it covered quite a vast range of ideas, suggestions and interpretation for the representation review. And the idea around the deliberations report was to try and provide some grouping and some understanding of why people in our community were making suggestions for things. But just wanted to acknowledge that it is very important to read the full submissions for the representation review process, and as part of the Local Government Commissioner guidelines, for those who didn't attend the hearings, you do need to watch them online to bring yourself fully up to date before making that final decision, which will be in the council meeting on the 30th of October. I do need a recommendation today. We have a statutory deadline of 8 weeks following the closing of submissions for the representation review to put forward our final proposal. As you know, once that final proposal has had public notice, people have a right to appeals and objections, and they go through to the Local Government Commission, and then a final decision will be made next year by the Local Government Commission. Today, you just need to consider if there are any changes to the initial proposal as a result of the submissions made. And as mentioned earlier, I'm also looking to why those decisions are being made today. Just a reminder that the initial proposal included 2 councillors in the Greytown General Ward, 2 councillors in the Featherston Greytown Ward, 2 councillors in the Martinborough Greytown Ward, 2 councillors at large, which everybody votes for, 1 Māori ward, which is not part of the decision that needs to be made in this representation review, and the mayor, which is also not part of the decision that needs to be made as part of the representation review. And community boards, status quo for those 3 community boards, Greytown, Featherston and Martinborough. And the proposal also included a rural advisory group, which falls outside of the representation review, but was in the process.
Okay, just before we go into the full questions and debate on the proposals, you mentioned that you need a direction from this table and reasons for that. I just want to check how you want those reasons captured, because the decision we are making today is a recommendation. How do you wish to capture the reasons for that? Is it just through Amy's? Okay.
Through Amy and myself, so I'll take some, and that will come through in the report that will go to council on the 30th. There'll be the final proposal and the reasons why that was decided.
Wonderful. So Councillor Olds had his hand up very quickly.
Oh, I didn't.
Yes, you.
No, the only question I had was about a conflict of interest in terms of community boards, and I'm not sure if that's been addressed at all. We've got 2.
Yes, it has been addressed. I'll let Janice speak to it for reassurance, and then we'll move on to the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so the question that was posed is there a conflict where councillors at the table today have a familial relationship with somebody who is on a community board? Yep. We are talking about a future election cycle. The people have to stand and be voted into council and community boards. There's no guarantee that anyone at the table today will be the council in 2025, or if you retain community boards, that the same people would be on the community boards. Therefore, there is no conflict at that level. And also, you are not the final decision maker. You put your proposal to the Local Government Commission and they then make the final decision on your representation. So whilst you are going through today and putting forward your proposal to the Local Government Commission, you are not making the decision. So on both platforms, there is no conflict.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. I actually agree with Councillor Plummer on this. I just don't see this. If you're doing a scientific experiment, this would be an insignificant sample size. It's actually meaningful. I don't see there's any mandate to change from this small number.
I agree. Yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you, but we've not taken that stance on any of our other applications or submissions, and we are in a process where we need to make a direction today. If the decision is we debate this as the status quo, that's fine, but we still must go through the process to come to an outcome.
I
I'd
agree.
like to propose we maintain the status quo on the basis that there has been next to no feedback from the community. There is no, I don't believe there's a mandate to change. And on your point, we have to do a review of this. On all the other things we do, we are statutorily obliged to actually come up with rates or these sorts of things. We're not statutorily obliged to make a change. We're statutorily obliged to consult, make a recommendation.
That's
And my recommendation is no change because we don't have the support of the community to change.
Janice has got something to say.
Irrespective of how big or small our response base is, and I think the normal rule of thumb that is widely used in this sort of field is that every person who actually puts in a submission that normally talks to their family and we believe that between 10 and 20 people agree with the single submitter. But anyway, it's overwhelmingly clear that people do not support the initial proposals that we put out. That's my statement.
We just hear from Janice.
This is a different process to any process you would normally go through for decision making around this table. There are different requirements from the Local Government Commission around this process, and it requires you to have reflected and reviewed the submissions that you have from your community, and then the evidence from this meeting and those submissions and your proposal goes to the Commissioner. So you need to consider all of the feedback that you have in this document before you make a decision.
Yep.
That is not just making a decision to say status quo applies. And I would ask, when you say that the word you use, but there's no mandate for change, do you mean no mandate to the proposed solution or no mandate from where you are today? Because that's not clear either.
To anything.
But there is a process. It is a mandated process, and you have to go through that every 6 years. You are at that point today, so you have to go through this regardless of it not being the normal process that you would go through.
And there is evidence that that the people who responded don't necessarily support the proposal. And here, I don't think there's anything to suggest that that the people who have submitted aren't looking for some level of change.
We've only got one option to change, is what I understand. We're only allowed, we can't go and change what we consulted for. So that's what we've got to look at. We can't look at all the other options.
We've put out one proposal for initial consultation. We've now received feedback. We're in a position now where we can alter our initial proposal to perhaps, if it is the thinking of this group, better reflect the submissions we have received. And then that will go to decision making on 30th of October to then go to the Commissioner for decision making. So it may be that the initial proposal is changed. I don't know what the debate will look like. It may be that the initial proposal is changed to the current status quo. The debate may take us down a path where the initial proposal pulls in some of the suggestions that we've received in submissions. That's the point of this debate today.
Yeah, I think we'd be doing our community a disservice if we didn't debate what's been presented. I've read through the submissions. I presume everybody else has. There is certainly a very loud voice for a rural representative around this table. There are a number of things that may have not been presented in a submission, but have been spoken in our communities at large, and I think we have to capture that. But I don't think we'd be doing anybody we'd be doing our communities a disservice if we didn't debate this, if we didn't discuss it, and give some feedback to those that spent the time submitting, even though they may be a small number. That's my view.
I agree with you. I was under the understanding that we had the status quo or option 2, and that was it. we were only allowed to have that option, and if that didn't go through, it went to status quo. So now you're telling us we can actually change that option.
So could I just, I put a proposal forward, it's been seconded.
Can we, everyone just take a breath? I've just been conferring that with Janice, and she said to double check with her if it was a formal amendment to the representation. But just before we go there, just to clarify, we could only ever put one proposal out to the community for consultation. That is the methodology that this particular consultation and review takes. However, as we step through it, we, this table, absolutely are able to take the feedback and submissions that we've received and amend our one proposal. We're never able to have multiple proposals, but there is the opportunity throughout this process to amend to better reflect, and that's where we're at today.
Okay.
You have formal.
My formal proposal, and I've read the submissions, I've watched the videos, and yes, there are some people who say, let's have a rural ward, maybe 20. That is not enough to say to the 9, 10, 11,000 people in the community to change how they vote. 20 people is not, it's not even a statistical.
Do you have?
So my formal recommendation, my formal proposal that I've said is that we accept the status quo going forward for the next election.
And when you say status quo, you mean
3 wards, 3 councillors, Maori ward, community boards,
the mayor?
as it is today.
You're still happy to second? We'll put it to a vote. If the vote is successful, that will be, we'll move on.
Well, wait, you do need to hear from everybody though, don't you, for the commissioner?
Yeah, through you, Chair, this is a slightly different process, as Janice mentioned. When looking through the submissions, we just need to acknowledge all of our communities of interest, whether they be 20 people or 2,000 people. And as part of the process, we as a council just need to be clear that if a group of people have identified themselves as a community of interest, such as our coastal or our rural, we need to be very clear if we are not providing representation for them, why that might be, or if there is another form of representation that we would like to consider for them. So we need to step through these communities of interest and these groups that have provided support for community boards or no support for community boards, and just help our community understand why we're making the decisions we are today, and if they are not being represented as a rural ward, for example, what that representation may look like.
So we can take Alistair's proposal, his recommendation. There's still a full debate that needs to happen before it goes to vote. Alistair, do you want to speak further to your proposal?
Okay, well, I am very sympathetic to the rural ward seems to be the issue that got the most traction out of all these submissions. And whilst I am highly sympathetic of it, we have talked around this council about a number of people who have a rural bent in the way they think. You've got Colin, Woody, Aidan, and myself for a start, who have that focus anyway.
We had a family out for 20 years.
Yeah, so whilst I am personally in favour of having a rural ward within each of our 3 districts, I don't believe that we have the mandate from the 50 or so submissions that pushed that particular thing to mandate that onto the 11,000 other people who think, when we are actually within this council and the previous council what I was on, and I can't talk of the previous ones to that, but there were a number of people from a rural background anyway. I personally would like to see it be dictated as a rural person, within a boundary, but I don't think there's the mandate to do that within this at the moment. So I'm stuck with where we are, that no matter which way we look, and they are the only identified interest group that I could see in all the submissions, clearly identified. Maybe coastal, maybe, but certainly not not easily identifiable like rural. And I think we, at the moment, we do our rural community reasonably well. There's a lot of conversation that goes around this table about the effects on rural. But again, it's still a democracy. I'm not sure that any rural person would represent the rural community any better than what Aidan and Colin and Woody and myself have done, and Kate, so we do take that into account. But it's still a democracy. It's still people around the table who can make that vote. So again, I come back to my original point. I don't see that there's a mandate to change at this stage. And the system is working. It could be better, yes, absolutely. But right now, we probably cover off as best we can, given the interest in the community.
Martin, do you want to speak as a second?
No, what I wanted to say when I seconded.
Aidan.
Thanks, Chair. Reading through the submissions and reading through this paper, as I was reading through the submissions, I was actually going through and counting how many submissions were made on that formed letter. And while some of the people who did sign that formed letter had attended some of our drop-in sessions and had conversations with councillors and staff in the community, the large majority of people who had signed that formed letter had not had any contact or any discussions with us on this proposal or why, to understand why we come to the decisions and the proposal. There were other people who did make their own submissions who said that they agreed with the author of that formed letter, and I suppose I'm unhappy, or I suppose is unhappy the word to use, I don't know, but I'm just feel that it was unfortunate that all those people that signed that formed letter, we hadn't had the opportunity to get to and to discuss this proposal with, and that formed letter was essentially the view of one person, and those 35 people, which is 27% of the total submissions, were agreeing with one person as opposed to understanding the whole rationale behind where that proposal had come from. And while that formed letter was really pushing for a rural ward, and I certainly aim to see, and I've asked a number of people within our communities in the past probably 4, 5, 6 years to put their hand up who have lived or who are farmers who have lived outside of our communities, of our townships, and I've asked people who are farmers to put their hands up to come on council or come on community board to give that rural perspective. Everyone is busy, they're running their businesses. Some of them are multi-million-dollar businesses, so they don't have time to park and walk away from that for a day a week or 2 days a week to come and do council business. So I think, and certainly the discussion around the rural advisory group, and if it becomes a coastal advisory group, I think will be beneficial. But I'm just wondering as to whether instead of having 2 at-large councillors, can they be, is it possible to have, without having to redraw ward boundaries, can they be rural at-large councillors?
Through you, Chair, that did come through in the submissions as a form of representation. The only way to do that would be to encourage rural people to stand for at-large.
Yep.
Sorry, can I just get clarification? Are you talking about the name of the ward as rural?
It'd be rural / at-large. Have a flight boat camps.
No, I see what you mean. Yeah.
As a rural ward requires a
Boundary change.
Yeah, for it to have a name, it needs a boundary.
Right.
It needs to be a general ward, basically. At large is considered the whole district, so it doesn't have a name.
Councillor Maynard.
Yeah, so I too was watching. I was I watched the hearings and I read through all of the submissions, and I think that it is disappointing. I note that it comes to 1.1% of the people here in the district, and so I too, I'm looking at it like there just does not appear to be an appetite, even with the questions that were being asked on, would you be interested in this or staying the same? It was almost 50-50 of the 1.1%, let alone what we haven't heard. So in my mind, there just doesn't appear to be that appetite for change at this time. But I think we have heard strongly, and not just in the hearings, but also in what was written, that there is a rural ward wanted. I guess in my mind, because I heard what Jim Headley was saying when he spoke about, rural people don't stand because there's because there's not enough rural area in their ward, so they don't feel that they get the vote. But I thought that at large would have actually kind of helped to solve that, and yet that there's no appetite from the rural ward to actually utilise the at large, which would have given from across the district people to be able to vote. So that option was there, and it wasn't kind of taken up, which is a little bit of a shame. But that wasn't what they were interested in, and it sounds like they wanted it to be called that. And I think with the Rural Advisory Board coming on with the next one, we would be able to use that, because we have the next one would be in 6 years, be able to see, because some people were saying that it didn't work last time. Some people were saying that that's what we need to be able to cover off our rural areas. And again, it could feed into the community boards. So people that are sitting on that rural advisory board from their different areas would be able to feed in to each of the community boards as well. Then that may be a way around it, but it will also be able to give that, that little test on how that's going, where are we looking at now, and how can we move forward, because there was enough to me from the rural community. We know that they normally elect a person from the area to speak on their behalf. So I think there was enough calling for something within the rural area to be looked at, so they feel heard. And I think that maybe that rural advisory board would be the best way to start, to be able to then, look like a litmus test, I guess. And then you can and then you can look at whether how we break it into that ward. And maybe at that time, when the ward comes, it would look like two from each district. Plus, you've got the rural one. One would then be in the rural area. Well, I don't know, because I haven't seen the stats. So I don't want to throw stuff out there that I don't actually have any of the information for. But with the next review, that could actually be something, because we have heard that that's what they're asking for, and I believe that it's climate change that. It's probably been putting it more in the fore, and the fact that there wasn't very many people that put through at the last representation review. The changes and things that are going on within our rural areas, and how they're being impacted by different weather events and things. That's where we need to have a little bit more, I suppose, where they need to feel heard. And of course the other one, the highest one that got anything, was the fact that we keep community boards, which isn't even on the table anyway, so I'm not worried about that. But I do think that there is a way, perhaps, of looking at the Rural Advisory Board and having one of those members to be able to sit on and and change that, because I did hear that people felt that they needed more, to make them more effective. I guess that was one of the comments. But Louise, and who spoke from the Greytown Community Board, and also Dan DeBona, you'll never get, for what you pay those people in each of you'd never be able to pay someone that amount to get that amount of work done. And these people are ones that would normally, it's a no-brainer to keep people that are that passionate about about their area, and having the access to the communities where they can then feed up. So that's where I sit. I believe option C, which is just keeping it the same. Our council is 333 at the same, and one Māori ward and one mayor. So yeah, kia ora.
Just quickly before we move to Councillor Olds, could either of you comment on perhaps the unintended consequence of a rural ward? As others have mentioned, the presenters, a lot of people in favour of a rural ward. I'm just wondering if we were to put in a rural ward, perhaps with one representative, to my mind, if I think about what that looks like for the Māori ward, is that the same? So would people in the rural ward only vote for one representative and mayor, therefore having less votes?
Correct. So through you, Chair, there's a couple of options that have been talked about at the table so far. One was related to using at-large for representation, which is something that would happen outside the representation review. The other is changing the boundary lines of our district and therefore creating what is effectively a general ward for the rural people. So correct, those that are in the Martinborough ward would vote for the Martinborough councillors, those in Greytown and Featherston, and then the rural people would vote for the rural ward. So depending on plus minus 10% and where those boundaries fall, you would have one or two councillors. So you'd need to do a little bit of work.
3 councillors.
You'd need to do some work around population data. It is a significant amount of work. You'd need to work with Statistics New Zealand and we'd look to utilise some of our contractors as well in regards to making sure we had accurate advice on those boundary lines and where they would fall. The boundary lines for representation are put through to stats, so it also impacts the census and the data that is collected for the census. And normally those boundary lines fall on roads, property boundaries, or streams and rivers. So we'd need to work within the scope of Stats New Zealand. It's quite a lot of work. We'd go down to mesh block data.
So just to confirm, it wouldn't be the decision of this table as to how many councillors would be in the ward. It would be based on the statistics of population, and secondly, based on population, depending on how many councillors were deemed for that, those voting in the rural ward may not be disadvantaged by having more or less votes than they currently have under the current status.
Correct. We would need to do quite a substantial amount of work leading up to that final proposal to look at the population numbers and where those boundary lines would fall. There have been a couple of different options raised. One of the submissions included a map with some boundary lines on it. So we'd need to just get some clear direction on that. And then that final proposal would have some more details in it that we don't have today.
Councillor Olds.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm a little embarrassed actually here because the workshop that we had to discuss the representation review was only attended by a small number of councillors at the time, and that shaped our consultation document, to be quite honest. So I'm feeling that there was a lack of interest from councillors, to be quite honest, to attend that workshop, which was quite critical. So that shaped the consultation document, and I recall going to the first meeting where the consultation document was to be adopted. I can't remember the date now. And there were some changes, and particularly around community boards, that took the shape of the document, you know. And here we are debating various options again, which is ridiculous because that should have happened at that workshop. That formed the consultation document. And if councillors couldn't be bothered attending that for whatever reason, so be it. The reality is that what we're doing is going over old ground effectively. We sent a document out there to get some feedback from our community. It didn't achieve significant numbers, which is, to me, is quite disappointing. And maybe there was just a lack of interest from our community about the direction that we should be taking as far as representation goes, you know. So what I'm hearing at the moment, and Alice has put a proposal forward, is that because of my sense of frustration and anger to some extent, I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Plummer in this particular instance. I'm really cross about it, actually. So,
The resolution.
I think we're still going around.
Yeah, no.
Talking about
People still
things.
need to talk.
Okay, sorry,
You haven't heard from one at the table.
no, so
Yeah, so through you, Chair, as well, I would be very keen for some,
Excuse me, Madam Chair, point of order. I put a procedural motion that's meant to shut debate, provided I have a second.
does the mayor have a second?
Well, and I like what the mayor's going, but I don't think we need to hear from the office anymore. We've got 3 councillors that haven't said, 4 councillors that haven't said anything. Do they have anything to say? And then let's vote.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right, carry on the conversation. Based on the feedback that we received from the hearings and the submissions, I note that you said that the last representation review we had 8, and this time we've had 129. So I think that was a big uplift. And I just wanted to make the point that if there has been a lack of engagement from either councillors or the community, I don't think that's reflective of the work that the officers have put in. I think you've put a lot of work into this, and there's been a lot of stepwise conversation to get us to the point today. So I feel very clear in what we're doing now is giving our feedback based on what we've heard from the community about the proposal that we put up. So my feedback on the feedback. We did hear a lot of support for the rural ward, but the support that we had for a rural ward was around just keeping rates low. I didn't hear the line very much that that we don't engage effectively with our rural community. It just keeps coming back about how the rates are becoming unaffordable, and they are. That's across the board, but I don't know that having a specific rural ward would address that issue. I think what I did hear is that rural people would like a chance to be heard more on the table, and I think a rural advisory group would achieve that more effectively, or a coastal and rural advisory group. And I think the other thing that we need to be aware of when we talk about rural people, not everybody who lives rurally is a farmer. And I think a lot of submissions that we had were people who wanted farming representation as opposed to rural representation. One of the presenters that we had come and talk to us talked about the at-large councillors and the risk that we would run if we had 2 ward councillors for each ward, as well as 2 at-large councillors and then a mayor at-large, that we run the risk of having weighted representation in one ward. So if all the at-large councillors did end up coming from one town and the mayor was also from that town, and then the councillors in that town, you can end up with more people in that town than across the other 2. And I think one of the reasons why the setup that we have now works so well is because there is a balance of 3 from each town. So I think we avoid that picking teams, picking sides, only advocating for our own patch, because we don't need to. We're sort of balanced out across the 3. So I quite like that. I do think it's worth talking about community boards. And this is a difficult conversation to have, because I genuinely really like our community board in Featherston. I like the people that I work with there, had a really good time, and I do think that the community engages well with that community board. What I don't see is a lot of movement from that community board up to here at the table. So whilst I look at the Martin Borough in Greytown, and I think they're doing very, very good things, a lot of the things that they're doing that are really good are because of the people that they are and not because of the structure of the community board. And so I think that we need to have a serious conversation about whether or not we are empowering these community members to do the good work that they want to do with the structure of the community board, or is there a better way to do it? And I think community boards are expensive. They're expensive to run elections for. They're expensive to maintain. And I think, you know, when we're being pushed over and over again to go line by line through our expenses and get rid of the nice to haves and just focus on the core business, I don't know that community boards stand up against that metric. So I think we need to really think about whether or not community boards are the best way for our community to be heard around the table here generally. Feedback.
Councillor Gray, if we are looking to get feedback from everyone before we go vote, Councillor.
Chair, Colin, I understand your frustrations. I do find it a little insulting to stereotype that everyone that didn't come to that meeting couldn't be bothered. There were some of us that had other commitments. I don't know about everyone, but I personally was quite annoyed that I couldn't be there that day, especially when I found out some things that had been discussed, etc. Beck, I understand your, I think it was Dean DeBona, wasn't it, that said about the giving too much weight, too weighted to one town. Then it was. Look at what Louise said, which was my theory of early on too, that looking down the line of a huge possibility, I suppose you could say, of amalgamation at large may be the way things are heading, and it would be a good thing maybe to go that way. But I'm sort of with Alistair in a way that, yeah, the 1% of submissions, and it's the same every time we get submissions, it's a very small minority that actually prove it, but they do take the time to submit, so you have to listen to them. Take it all on board. But I'm sort of leaning towards sticking with the status quo as much as I would like to see a rural side of it. It would become, I believe, 3 rural ward councillors and 2 for each town with the population.
Depends.
Yeah, but I think it was Claire Bleakley that said we should do, if you were going to go that way, you'd work on RD rural addresses, delivery addresses, which would probably make sense if you were going to look at boundaries for that type of thing.
Yeah, just do a talk fest this. So I'm not going to talk for too long at all, other than pretty much agree with Councillor Plimmer's movement. Sorry, excuse me, movement here. But I'd also like to support a couple of things that Beck said. One is the work that you guys have done. Council officers has been amazing. Thank you very much for the work that you put in on this. It's been extraordinary. But regarding the community boards as well, I fully endorse what you said there, and I don't really think I've got anything else to add to that. But yeah, I think it was, I don't want to just repeat what has already been said because I pretty much agree.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just would like to ask one question. If we choose to stay with the current status quo, where does the Māori ward seat sit? Because in the current proposal that has been pulled in and as part of the current numbers, does that become an additional to the current numbers?
Correct. So the initial proposal had 2 councillors elected for Greytown, 2 councillors for Martinborough, 2 councillors for Featherston, 1 for the Māori ward, and then everybody voted for at large and everybody voted for the mayor. The status quo, which you're all suggesting here, is 3 councillors for Greytown, 3 councillors for Martinborough, 3 councillors for Featherston, 1 councillor for the Māori ward, and then everybody votes for the mayor. So those on the Māori electoral roll will get 2 votes, and those on the general ward will get 4 votes.
Yeah, but it will be an increase of councillors by
Numbers,
one,
yes.
just to increase.
Can I just also add to that, in the resolution you're putting forward today, it'd be good to get some clarification if you want to set up a rural/coastal advisory.
Yeah.
So that went out in the proposal. If you want to go to the status quo, you're not suggesting to set that up. So if you do want to amend the resolution, you could include that if you wanted to.
Yeah, because like, I totally call what everybody has said, but I'd want to bring light to our coastal whānau because that's a voice that's not heard at all because they're not all farmers. We're not all farmers that live out there. So it's nice to know that our farming voice is heard around this table, but that's not what's heard out there, you know, our coastal voice. And then we've got a big community out there.
Yeah, that's correct.
Totally agree.
Councillor Plummer, do you wish to make an amendment to your? So my understanding is if there is a desire, we can't amend the proposal until it's.
Can't talk about rural advisory.
Nikki, do you want to answer?
So what we've got a proposal currently, it doesn't include, formally include an advisory board.
So you can't.
If members wish to have that, we put the vote to see.
Could I just ask a clarification? Rural Advisory Board is not a representation review matter. It is a council matter that we can establish at any time we like. Thank you.
So it doesn't need to be clarified here today. I just thought I've said it.
Just the point that we did consult on that issue. It's an issue on the table. If you want to make that decision now, you could direct officers. You can make that at a different time. We have done a bit of work. It could even just be a resolution to bring a paper to the table. So you could advise us to bring a paper which would include options. I know that Nikki's already done work to look at other rural advisory groups. We already have terms of references, how they worked out other councils. So that could be a direction setting if you wanted to, if you wanted that work to get under.
So add it in.
Identified
Add it into your resolution.
group of interest.
People.
With
It's a separate issue for council to deal. It doesn't need to be done as part of this. This is representation.
It doesn't need to go to.
Yeah, I will.
It can be a
I
separate.
think so. Unless there's any final words, Councillor Plummer's proposed resolution, Amy, which is
I'm just checking. It's
for the final proposal to go to the October 30th.
So just change those few words.
So we'll put the Councillor Plummer's resolution to the vote, which is to maintain the status quo, which is option C, reinstate the current 2022 representation arrangement or the status quo, which was seconded by the Mayor. All those in favour, please state aye.
Aye.
All those against, no.
No.
2 against. The motion is carried.
Can I ask for an amendment to
You
the
want
motion? No.
an amendment, you can just put your own.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So what I'd like to propose is that we direct officers to look at a rural advisory group and other perhaps coastal interest group.
I'd second that.
As an option. So I'll put that through as a formal request.
Any, to direct council officers to bring a paper, direct the CEO to bring a paper for options on it.
Great.
Coastal advisory. Coastal advisory, yeah. Coastal rural advisory, that's Craig.
Just get the evening right, that's the main thing.
We do it. We do it. Don't make it.
Any discussion on that before we put the motion to the vote? I've had a lot of discussion on its appearance. All those in favour of seeing a paper for the Rural Coastal Advisory Group, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, motion is carried.
Excellent.
Gone off script because there was so much discussion. And I think I've missed the most important, which was to receive the representation review paper. So if we can take you, Aidan and Councillor Plummer, all those in favour of receiving the paper, all those against, motion is carried. Aidan. Unless there's anything else that I've missed from the script, I believe that brings us to the end of this meeting. And we will re-adjourn the actual SWC meeting at, sorry, what's my name?
Voice now.
At 12:30. I think it would be nice to close this meeting out with a karakia. So, well, I'll just find the last one. Yeah. The meeting is closed, but we'll do the karakia. Tua mutu mātou mahi o tēnei wā aki kia tia mai mātou katoa o mātou hoa o mātou whānau aio ki te aro rangi. Meeting is closed, everyone. See you back here at 12:30.
I know.
Lunch.